This is a W&A railroad tunnel. And what year was this built? 1836. Construction began in 1848. First train went through in 1850. 1862, the General was stolen and made it through the tunnel. The Great Locomotive Chase. The General was stolen by the Yankees, and the Texas was used to try to chase it down in Atlanta. It went all the way almost to Chattanooga.
So way before dynamite was ever even invented, so the only explosive they really had was gunpowder, and then the rest was done by manpower and hand tools. All in the mountain over here, like underneath the kudzu.
Look, there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
There, well, that's the other golf cart. So, now is everybody familiar with this lovely green stuff we have growing over here? Yes, okay, very
everywhere.
Good. So the tunnel is a total of 1,477 feet long, so it's just over a quarter of a mile. The western crew, which is this side here, dug for 575 feet, which left 902 feet for the eastern crew, and we'll talk about why that is as we go through. Now also keep in mind the walls you'll see inside are 4.5 feet thick of whatever material you see, so either rock or brick, and the arch and ceiling is 2.5 feet thick of all brick, except where they had to put in some filler material. When they restored the tunnel, it sat empty for about 70 years, so in that time period a lot of the original brick had fallen out. Now our tunnel here was dug and built by Irish immigrants. A lot of people assume that it was slaves because of the location and the timing, and slaves certainly had a huge hand in the completion of the tunnel because they actually made all of the brick for the tunnel. So all of the brick you see in here, plus what's stacked behind it, either 2.5 or 4.5 feet, was handmade on site using the Georgia red clay and whatever concoction of liquid they were told to use. Then they would shape the bricks and fire them in kilns that were built on site and deliver them to either side of the mountain. Now over here on my left hand side, you see this little pocket over here. This is actually what's called a stand-in, and as the name suggests, this was for people to stand in if they were walking through the tunnels at the time a train was coming through and they couldn't get out before the train got inside. They can actually hop into one of these to keep from getting run over by the train. Now this one is actually made to fit 2 adult people in it, so this would have been quite a tight squeeze. There are 6 that are this size and then 2 that are double the width of this one here. And also if you look at the bottom here, you can see we're about a foot or so up from where the original track laid. That's just because they had to put the drainage system in and run electrical before they paved the tunnel. So other than that, this is the exact path that the trains would have taken from 1850 until 1928. Now over here on the right hand side, you can see this big chunk of rock here, and that's the beginning of the reason that the western crew only dug 575 feet, and there's a whole lot more where that came from. In fact, the next piece starts right here again along the right hand side. Here goes for about 150 feet along this wall. You can see where they rocked around the contour of it here. They filled in holes where they had to, like this one. But for the most part, they would leave it as whole as possible, just digging out the width that was needed until it met the brick on the top, or the line for the brick. Then right where this light is shining here is probably the best example we have that's eye level anyway of a drill mark inside the tunnel. And that's made by what's called a 2-man rock drill. Some people call it a star drill. It's basically a giant Phillips head screwdriver bit. So if we were all paired up at work, one of us would have a sledgehammer, the other would have a drill bit, and you'd hit it and twist it to get it embedded in the rock as far as possible. Then you'd probably put some black powder in there, light a fuse, run away, and then come back and see what was left over. But the length of that one there is just really impressive. The next section that we're coming to here is actually my favorite portion of the tunnel. So if you look kind of ahead of us here at the ceiling, I know it's hard for you guys in the back to see, but you can see how there's no brick up here for about 100 feet or so, and that's actually because this was at some point one solid piece of rock that we're about to go through. So this section alone took about 3 months for the Western crew to dig through, and this is the main reason that they only dug the 575 feet. You know, it would have taken quite a long time and a lot of work to get through there, but they would basically use it as kind of natural scaffolding. So they actually started at the top here, and then they would kind of work their way down and dig out what they needed to. And then this kind of bleach line you can see down the center here is actually because the smokestacks of the trains were so close to the ceiling, it kind of baked the color off. And then the smoke and soot would roll off to the side. So this dark gray you see on either side is actually smoke and soot residue left over from the trains that came through here. And if you look at the top of the tunnel the rest of the way through, you can actually kind of still see that line down the center there. We have another standing coming up over here on the right-hand side, and another big chunk of rock over here on the left. And then right about where the middle of the cart is here is 575 feet from the opening we came in and 902 feet from the opening in front of us. So this is where the two crews met on October 31st, so we just had the 169th anniversary the other day. October 31st of 1849, the two crews met in this spot here. And it was at this point they realized they had not missed one another in the mountains somewhere, and their job was pretty much complete at that point. Now it took a few more months to get the track laid, to get everything inspected and approved, and on May the 9th of 1850, less than 22 months after excavation began, the first train ran through the tunnel here. So less than 2 years from the very first day of digging to the first train coming through the tunnel. Now if you can look at the ceiling, it's kind of hard to see here, but if you can look at the ceiling kind of right here on the right hand side, right kind of where the arch is, you can actually see there's almost like a little ditch that runs along the ceiling there. And that's actually because as the trains got larger and larger, the tunnel obviously didn't get any bigger. And so we do actually have record of several trains that came through and got stuck in here and had to be pushed out the other side by other trains. So that's actually the mark made by the boxcars as they were trying to squeeze through the tunnel before they opened the tunnel next door.
How many people died in this construction?
We don't have those records, and the reason for that is because they were immigrants, they didn't really find it necessary to keep records. Yeah. Unfortunately, like that's horrible, but. So the tunnel was in use from May of 1850 until 1928, which is when they opened the tunnel next door. At that point, they ripped up the railroad tracks in here and pretty much just left it for Mother Nature to take its course. Now, we've heard that people used the tunnel as shelter during the Great Depression. We've heard there were some not so legal things that took place in here during Prohibition. I'm sure you have no idea to what I'm referring. And, but after several years, the kudzu on top of the mountain started causing a lot of issues. The tunnel next door started causing issues as well. Anytime they dig a new trench for that tunnel, it would damage the drainage system in here. And so after several decades, you just had kind of a flooded, nasty mess in here. And so the state of Georgia, who still owned the tunnel at the time, decided they were kind of tired of fooling with it. They had their new tunnel that the trains went through. They didn't really need this one anymore. And so they decided they were going to put dirt in both ends and close it off so nobody could access it anymore. And when the people of Tunnel Hill found out what the state's plans were, they were very unhappy about it, and they decided to do something about it. So they went up to Tunnel Hill City Hall called the state of Georgia, and they worked out a deal to purchase the tunnel for what I've heard was like $10. And then the city has owned it since then. That was around 1992, and that's when efforts began to raise the money to restore the tunnel to its original condition. It took a few years to get the money raised, a few more years to do the actual restoration, and on May the 9th of 2000, 150 years to the day that the first train ran through, the tunnel was reopened to the public as a historic site. So it's been reopened again for about 18 and a half years now. Kept on going this way, kind of curved around to the right there and headed down south toward Atlanta.
So they would pile up the ties, throw the rails on top, and the heat would bend the ties. I mean the rails. Fall has arrived in Georgia, at Tunnel Hill, Georgia.